beautiful people, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you all are having an amazing, marvelous, and magnificent day or night. My name is TatiV, and if you're a true crime lover like me, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Before we get into the video, I just want to, of course, shout out my first comment winner, Lauren Dial. Shout out to you, girl, for being the first comment winner. And if any of you guys want to be the first comment winner, just comment down below being the first one to comment, and you could be featured in one of my future uploads. So I also want to promote my true crime podcast that I just started. It's called Talk True Crime to Me, and it'll be cases from my channel on my podcast in my regular voice, and it is on Spotify, so make sure you check that out. The link will be down below. So let's go ahead and get into today's video. We have this story, and then we have one more story, guys, and we'll be finished with this whole entire book, and I'll be giving this away on Valentine's Day, so please look forward to a community post, and I'm going to make a shorts video with a question or two, and the first person to get the question right will win the book. I'm going to make it fairly easy. So yeah, let's get into it. Sit back, relax, grab a snack, and enjoy another crazy ass story. Warning, this video may contain details of graphic content. This channel is for mature audiences only. Some viewers might find this disturbing. Tamie Engstrom had spent her entire life in the area around Youngstown, Ohio, midway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. On a cold February evening in 1981, 22-year-old Tamie dropped her 18-month-old son off with her best friend, Sharon King, and drove to work. Typical day. Tamie worked as a bartender at the Clover Bar in Hubbard, Ohio. Her shift started at 6:30 p.m., but she wasn't feeling well and called her mother at 9 p.m. and asked her to cover for her. Her mother, Elizabeth Heiss, worked at the same bar and came to cover the rest of her shift at 9:30 p.m. When Tamie left the Clover, however, she wasn't quite ill enough to go directly home just yet. Her friend was already watching her baby, and there was a drinking event scheduled that evening at the Nickelodeon Lounge, where her uncle, Daniel Heifner, was a regular patron. The Nickelodeon was another in a long list of dive bars in the area. It's set in Brookfield Township in the tiny town of Missouri, Ohio, just a few hundred feet away from Ohio's border with Pennsylvania. Tamie had several drinks with her uncle and showed off her new diamond ring she had purchased a few weeks before. It was a large ring with a cluster of diamonds that she had bought from her friend Sharon for $1,200. Tamie drank throughout the night with her uncle, a few other friends at the bar, and a man she met that night, 32-year-old Kenneth Pyros. Kenneth was a friend of her uncle. Although Tamie didn't know him, Kenneth was well known in the bar and throughout the Youngstown area. He grew up and graduated high school in Youngstown before attending Youngstown State University as a geology major. Although it took him 13 years, he finally got a degree. He had worked on an Alaskan fishing boat for a brief time, but most recently worked laying asphalt. Despite feeling ill, Tamie continued drinking. As midnight rolled around, she set her head on the bar table, and before long she had completely passed out. When she fell off her seat and onto the floor, Daniel helped her back into a booth and let her sleep for a bit. The bar was prepping to close at 1 p.m. Wow, so it was midday and she was just completely drunk. told her he would drive her home, but when he took her keys, she became upset. She insisted she was fine to drive home, but she clearly wasn't. That's when Kenneth Byros offered to take Tamie to an all-night diner to get her some coffee with hopes that it would sober her up. He would then bring her back to the Nickelodeon lounge and Daniel could decide if she could drive home herself. At 1:15 a.m., Tamie and Byros left the bar in Kenneth's car as Daniel stayed after hours with friends at the Nickelodeon. So I believe this page has a typo on it because down here it said 1 p.m. and now up here it's saying 1:15 a.m. So I believe it was 1 in the morning. I think this was a typo. So that same evening, Tammie's husband Andy had gone to the Clover bar to see her. When Tammie's mother told him that she went home sick, he drove to their house, but she wasn't there. He called her sister, who told him that she probably went to the Nickelodeon just after 1 a.m. Andy called the Nickelodeon and was mistakenly told that Tamie and her uncle Daniel had left the bar and were on their way home. Andy wasn't worried and went to bed that night, assuming she would walk in at any minute. Daniel waited at the Nickelodeon expecting Tamie and Kenneth to return, but neither of them showed. The next morning, Andy woke in a shock when he found that Tamie never came home. He drove to the Nickelodeon to find Tammie's car still sitting in the parking lot. Daniel informed him that Kenneth had given her a ride the night before. Andy showed up at Kenneth's home to ask where Tamie was. Kenneth said that after they left the bar, he only drove about 3 blocks before, quote, I tapped her on the shoulder and she freaked out. She got out of the car and started running through people's yards on David's Street, end quote. That's BS. I don't even know her, or I didn't know her, but that just sounds like BS. That's always, every time a man harms a woman, that's always a go-to. They ran out the car, they ran away, or he dropped her off at this location. It's the same line. Anyways, I digress. Andy told him that he was going to file a police report, end quote. If you don't turn up right fast, they are going to come looking for you and it's going to be your ass, end quote. The area where Kenneth claimed that Tamie had jumped out of the car was across the state line in Sharon, Pennsylvania. That day, Andy filed a missing persons report. Kenneth was confronted by several members of Tammie's family and friends. Each time he gave a similar explanation. She had jumped out of the car and he hadn't seen her since. He claimed that he chased her between houses for a while, but she was too fast and didn't want to raise attention because he had been driving after having several drinks. Tammie's uncle, however, noticed that Kenneth had a scratch above his right eye that wasn't there the night before. There was also scratches on his hands that he didn't notice the night before at Nickelodeon. Kenneth claimed that he scratched his hand when he got home, and that night he had locked himself out of the house and had to break a window. The scratch above his eye, he claimed, was from chopping wood early the next morning. Both Tammie's brother Tom and her father James didn't believe Kenneth's story. Quote, if you put one scratch on my daughter, I'll kill you, end quote, screamed her father. Tom told Kenneth, I'll rip your heart out. Kenneth reassured James, quote, don't worry, your daughter is going to be just fine. You wait and see, end quote. That evening, Kenneth helped friends and family search the area where he claimed Tamie jumped out of the car. After hours of searching, they found nothing. When Kenneth returned home where he lived with his mother and brother, his mother had found a gold ring on the bathroom floor and asked them about it. Quote, I have no idea. It looks like cheap gold, end quote. He told his mother disagreed. It was not a cheap ring. He told his mother that it could have belonged to the girl that jumped out of his car the night before. He took the ring and told his mother he would take it back to the Nickelodeon, but instead he hid it. As Tamie's friends and family continued the search, police called Kenneth and instructed him to come to the police station to give his statement, except for an arrest for driving under the influence of alcohol. Kenneth had no prior police record. Police from both Brookfield Township, Ohio and Sharon, Pennsylvania were present at the interview since the disappearance happened literally on the state line. During the interview, Kenneth gave a near-identical story that he had told Tamie's family, but this time he gave more detail. He claimed that Tamie had passed out in the car. He stopped at a bank teller machine to get some cash, and when he returned to the car, she woke up and screamed at him. She wanted him to drive her back to the Nickelodeon. When he told her they were on their way to get some coffee, she jumped out of the car and ran. The police captain, John Clark from Sharon, Pennsylvania, had some doubts about this story. As the interview pressed on, Captain Clark asked him if he had made some sexual advances toward Tamie. Kenneth had told Tamie's husband that he only tapped her on the shoulder, but he told Tamie's uncle that he accidentally touched her knee. Clark knew there was more to this story. Captain Clark gave Kenneth his theories. He suggested maybe he made a sexual advance. She denied him, and then she ran out of the car. Initially, Kenneth denied the idea, but when Clark added that maybe Tamie accidentally hit her head, Kenneth stopped him. Kenneth asked to speak to Clark alone. Then the other officers left the room. Kenneth then told Clark that his hypothesis was exactly what had happened. He added, quote, "and I've done something very bad," end quote. Quote, "It's like you said, we were in the car together. We were out along the railroad tracks. I touched her on the hand, then I either touched or felt her leg, but she pushed my hand away. The car wasn't stopped. She opened the door and fell and struck her head on the tracks," end quote. Kenneth went on to explain that Tamie had died next to the railroad tracks near his home on King Graves Road in Brookfield Township. Kenneth was immediately arrested, and he repeated the story for the other officers. Tamie had hit her head and died along the railroad tracks, but when they asked where her body was, he asked for an attorney. After speaking to his attorney, he agreed to take police to the body, but they weren't quite ready for what they would find. On Sunday, February 10th, Kenneth took police 40 miles east to Butler County, Pennsylvania. There, they found parts of Tamie's body. He then drove them 30 miles north to Venango County, Pennsylvania, where they found more body parts. Thomas had been busy that night. He had severed her head and right breast from her torso, while her right leg had been cut off above the knee. Her black leg stockings had been pushed to her ankles. Tamie's torso had been butchered. Kenneth had cut her open and removed her organs. Her bottom, rectum, and most of her genitalia had been removed and were never found. After a search of the area next to the railroad tracks, detectives found massive amounts of blood on the gravel. And this is supposed to be her uncle's friend. And you do this to your friend's niece. Like, this is just insane. In a nearby swamp, they found pieces of her intestines, gallbladder, liver, and bowels. What? He literally dissected this woman. Later, searches of the area uncovered her black leather coat with the knife marks around the collar. Tamie's black shoes were found with a single pubic hair inside that matched her DNA. A search of Kenneth's home provided a pocket knife covered in dry blood. The long brown coat and tennis shoes that Kenneth had worn to the bar that evening were in his bedroom, also covered with blood. Tamie's blood and pieces of her liver were found in the trunk of his car, despite the extensive butchering. And dismemberment of Tamie's body. An autopsy revealed she died of strangulation. Kenneth had strangled her with his bare hands for almost 5 minutes before she finally died. The medical examiner contained 91 stab wounds, all of which were inflicted after she was already deceased. There were also 5 blunt force wounds on the top of her head from the knife handle or possibly his fist. Kenneth Byros was charged with aggravated murder, attempted inappropriately touching, aggravated robbery, and felonious penetration. If found guilty, he faced a death sentence. During his trial, Kenneth's defense told of how he grew up with a same concept. He grew up with an emotionally abusive father. That still does not give anyone the excuse or the reason to take someone's life. I don't get it. I don't get why they try to pull that card. It's no excuse, period. They explained that until the murder, Kenneth had been a normal member of society with very little trouble with the law. Kenneth testified on his own behalf and provided yet another scenario of what had happened that night. Throughout his testimony, he wept profusely, garnering the nickname, quote, the CryBaby killer. From the press, during his testimony, he claimed that when he returned from the bank teller machine, he reached over and shook Tamie, who had passed out in his car. When she woke up, she was too drunk to tell him where she lived, so he took her home to allow her to sleep it off. He explained that he parked within a few hundred feet of his home and tried to wake her again. When she awoke this time, she screamed at him, quote, I don't know you, where are we, end quote. He went on to claim that she started hitting him, and he hit her with his forearm. That was when she opened the door and started running along the railroad tracks. He explained that he tried to catch up to her with his car and inadvertently hit her. When she fell, her head hit the gravel. Kenneth claimed he rolled Tamie onto her back and saw that her head was bleeding. She had hit her head against the railroad track. He told the court that Tamie screamed and threw rocks at him, and he pulled out his pocket knife to calm her down. Tamie, however, was able to take the knife away from him, which scratched his hands. He then pinned her down and placed his hands over his mouth. He didn't realize until after he removed his hands that he had smothered her. After realizing what he had done, he panicked, went home, and cleaned himself up. 20 minutes later, he returned to the body. He was angry at himself and angry at Tamie, believing that she had destroyed his life. He told the court that he then removed Tamie's clothes because they were in the way and started stabbing. He then dragged the body into the woods. As he grabbed her hands, he noticed a gold ring. He claimed he took off the ring and put it in his pockets, keep it from digging into his hands as he dragged her. When he tried to bury her, he realized that her body was too big for the hole he had dug. Rather than making the hole bigger, he cut off her head and leg. He then buried those parts parts in another location and buried her clothes separately from the body parts. The next day, as Kenneth washed his car, he realized that Tamie's purse was still in the car. He took it into his house and burned it in the fireplace. The following evening, after Tamie's friends and family members threatened him, he got worried that the body would be found so close to his house. He dug up the body parts and buried them in 2 separate locations across the state line in Pennsylvania. Okay, I have a question for y'all. Now, he buried the body parts in different parts of Pennsylvania. He buried a couple parts 40 miles from where he was at, and then he buried another set of parts 30 miles from where he was at from the other location. Now, do y'all think if Kenneth would have never told police where the body parts were found, do y'all think she would have ever been recovered? Let me know down below. I'm curious. Because in my opinion, I don't think she would have ever been found. Or I don't think they would have put, if they were found, I don't think they would have put those 2 together, those 2 locations of body parts together as one person. That's sick. During his testimony, Kenneth denied that he had told police that he had made SA towards her and had no excuse for removing her insides. He told the court he had no recollection of where those parts were. He also denied hitting Tamie on the top of her head with a knife handle or his fist. The autopsy and testimony of a forensic pathologist, however, poked holes in Viral's news story. He claimed to have stabbed her using only a pocket knife, but evidence proved that a much larger knife was used. The incisions around the genitals were inflicted with much more precision than a pocket knife would have provided. Additionally, there was no evidence that the victim had been struck by a car. Finally, the autopsy showed that one of her bones had been fractured and there was damage to the tissue around her neck. This could only have happened by strangulation, not by suffocation, as Kenneth claimed. It didn't matter what story he gave, he was going down one way or the other. Kenneth was found guilty on all counts, sentenced to death, and scheduled for execution by lethal injection. A year before his scheduled execution, Tamie's sister Debbie urged the Attorney General to deny Kenneth's plea for leniency. This is what she said, quote, "Kenneth beat, tortured, SA, and mutilated, dismembered, and robbed Tamie with no remorse. He has been given more humanity and mercy from the state than my sister ever had. It's time for justice to be served. Tamie was my sister and my best friend. She was hard, she was tortured, and she had to be scared that night," end quote. Kenneth was eventually executed on December 8th, 2009. He was added to the Guinness Book of World Records for being the first person in the United States to be put to death using a single drug, large dose of sodium, which is an anesthesia. 20 years after her death, Tamie's friend Sharon King wrote about her theories that the murder was part of a still continuing, satanic. Okay, I'm not even gonna read that because no. She claimed that when Tamie left the bar that night, her fingernails were painted red. However, when her body was recovered, her nails had been painted black. Okay, that's just too much for me. Additional unsubstantiated stories on the internet claim that Kenneth had taken Tamie to a shed behind his house where he had. Because of these stories, some people believe the Kenneth's house, which has since burned down, is still haunted by the ghost of Tamie Engstrom. Whoa. So that was the ending of the video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And let me know your thoughts down below. So be sure to look for a post on my community tab on Valentine's Day so you can win this book. Okay, that was loud. So thank you guys again, and I love you guys so much, and I'll see you all in my next video.